mobile first video programs that I'd ever seen. And Verizon was very much at the forefront of that kind of mobile video content. What do you think gives Verizon an edge to have been able to connect to their audience and continue to be a force in creating new content, culminating in what you've got with Go90 now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, we're certainly not alone anymore. But yeah, Verizon, I remember VCast going back to like 2006 or 5 maybe, where there were like a whole bunch of 24 episodes. I mean, 24 was like the biggest show on television at the time, and a whole bunch of like really mini original pieces of content like were supporting 24 that were part of VCast. I mean, look, part of it is like driven by necessity, right? Like Verizon, for better or for worse, it's the #1 wireless carrier in the United States, and sort of you hit at some point a certain saturation point, and you have to expand your businesses and take advantage of what you have in terms of your customer relationships and your knowledge about the data of what they're interested in, what they like. So there is obviously tons and tons of data that say like media is a huge driver and a huge connector, because those pipes exist, and that experience hopefully on the network is always a great one. And so you get like wherever you want it. And I think, like, not to be a corporate shill here, but like, the opportunity with Verizon really is to be in all of those places, right? Like in the living room, on a tablet, on your phone, anywhere you might want to go and get that content. And so everything we approach in terms of the content that we make at Go90, because that's like one of the centers of content at Verizon, is to do things like we're doing with Rebel Without a Crew. I mean, those are really exciting deals. Because the irony is like, yeah, I mean, Verizon Fios is in a certain number of million homes in the U.S., so we actually have a footprint on television delivery, but it's not quite as wide as El Rey. So having an opportunity to go backwards a little bit and say like, we're in the digital space, we're in the wireless connected space, but we also want to be able to access where we know fans exist for this content. And that to me is the most important thing of all, accessing fandoms wherever they may be. Sometimes the best place is TV. Sometimes it's on an editorial website, like Yahoo Sports, for example, has a much bigger audience than Go90 Sports does. So we port a lot of our Go90 Sports content over there. And in some cases, we'll be doing a first window on things like that too. So you just go wherever it makes the most sense.
So this brings up an interesting question for you, John, which is, when your big for-hire clients are coming to you, are they coming to you with that research in hand of what the audience they want to reach with this is? Or does it start more often with what is the best way for us to create an experience for this story?
Good question too. So that's a combination. Sometimes it's very specific. Like again, I'll use the Pixar example. They said, how would we redo this trailer? So we came up with 3 different concepts. So that was something, because they knew that audience didn't like the original one, but they also knew there was a message there of how they wanted to make that movie. Then it comes down to other ways of telling the story. It's funny because we talk about, I had a little sidebar yesterday. I was just talking about digital versus regular and all this type of stuff. And then we're working in a world now where I think it's all blurring now. It's like I don't look at Go90 anymore as just digital. I mean, it's content, and it's just how we look at this. I was on a panel with, I won't say who it was, but he kept on just hammering his fist saying, content is king, content is king. And then I kind of said, yeah, but you know what we're forgetting about is the queen, and the queen is distribution. And without the queen, the king doesn't really matter. But then we can't forget about the subjects in the kingdom, which is your audience. So it's really trying to find that balance between the 3, because you can have the best story, but if you don't know where to put it, then it doesn't matter. But let's say you do find a place to put it, but the audience isn't the right audience, then that's even a bigger problem. I think when we launched with, when I was at Buena Murray, we launched with you guys Happy Wheels, which was almost as worse as
which is back on Go90 now, by the way.
Is it back? Oh, fantastic. Well, at the time, we weren't necessarily, the machinima audience didn't really, there was a smaller audience, I think, on Go90. So as well as it didn't do as well as I think it could have, because we weren't thinking. We were thinking as, hey, we made a sale. And I think machinima was like that we had to get something on Go90. And I think that those are the things you have to look at, to say you have to find that algorithm as like, content's great, let's figure out where it should be, because that's where the audience is looking. And now I think a lot of platforms are very specific. Like when you talk about your demographics, you know exactly who you're catering to right now. If you talk to someone like Fullscreen, They have it down to like, an age of 21 to 26, or 18 to 25, and they call them the dependents and the independents. And the dependents are the 18 to 21s that still live at home, and then the 21 to 25 are the independents that are finally leaving. They are very specific about that audience. So when people do come to us, it is about like, we want to be more than just, we'll do the work. We're trying to making sure that this work we're doing is going to have a second and third season or a follow-up to it. So it's very important that we try to collaborate because we're in it for a much bigger picture. We're not trying just to be a work-for-hire company. We're going to start building that more out because the only thing we are missing is distribution, but that's why we're trying to partner up with the right people.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things about the distribution revolution that I've seen in, some time working in the media industry is the consistent story of someone being able to identify a market and build something that they know is going to fit for it. And one of the best examples that I can think of is actually Robert Rodriguez, where El Mariachi was created, in a very low budget. But the story I've always heard is that he knew that he would be able to put this out into a market in Mexico where there was not the same saturation and there was more opportunity to reach a market that would love this versus the US film market. I have to ask, how much do you think being a young network has meant that you didn't need to use the same sort of legacy rule set for understanding your data or reaching your audience?
I think it makes a huge difference because, again, the mindset you bring to it isn't that you're going to ride some wave. You're not, there was a moment in time in the cable business over the last, I'd say, 10 or 15 years ago. There was a moment where you couldn't get enough cable channels. It was the moment of multiplexing. It was the moment of, ESPN 1, 2, 3, 4, and the Ocho, right? You couldn't add more, you couldn't stop adding cable channels because the value proposition of the time from your cable provider was 1,000 channels. It was the holy grail to have 1,000 channels to surf through. It couldn't be more opposite. It's 180 degrees off now. It's going in the other direction. So we didn't ride that wave. We didn't ride that growth curve. And so we've always been tasked. And as you said, Robert originally with El Mariachi expected it to be a straight to Mexican home video product. And he was going to take the money from that deal and turn it into another direct-to-home video deal. He had no idea it would become, it would be released as a major motion picture, but that same scrappiness is what you have to do. And so again, I think not having this mindset that says we are wed to expecting 30 million viewers to show up for our shows means that you start from that same place. That I couldn't agree more with this concept of just knowing who you are, knowing who your brand is, creating for that group, and stopping. If you start to veer beyond that, you're probably another brand. You're probably another imprint of some kind, and you should launch that next to the other one, but you can't continue to grow as a full service, all things to all people sort of brand. And Robert really sticks to his knitting. So when whether it's for, alternative distribution, for traditional distribution, or even for the branded entertainment that we get tapped to do, you know what you're getting. You know there are no bunnies and rainbows when you come to a Robert Rodriguez production. It's
Unless
going to
they
be
explode.
Unless they explode.
Exploding bunny, that's a whole other
Exactly
story.
right.
By the way, the El Mariachi story is really detailed in the book, Rebel Without a Crew, which is like a must-read for any independent creator or anybody really. So if anybody's interested in the details of that, all in that book, which is fascinating.
So before I open it up to audience questions, actually, I think I'll just open it up to audience questions real quick. Who would like to ask a deep driving question to our audience? To
Operative
our
word deep
panelists?
No
and
pressure.
driving.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. I stumbled on El Mariachi. That's the one that they redid with Antonio Banderas in Hollywood, yes? No.
Well, it
Once
was.
Upon a Time in Mexico.
There was
That was a sequel.
Yeah, there
That
was
was
a
a
sequel. Yep. The original was actually remastered, and the $7,000 film was remastered and released by Columbia as
Okay.
a feature film. So it won the
Okay.
Sundance Audience Award, and then it was released as a feature film. It was absolutely far beyond anyone's wildest dreams.
Great. I love that discussion, and I'm just wanting a little more clarity because it sounded like Caitlin said Robert had this vision and he knew his audience, and then when you were speaking, it sounded like he had this vision for this film, and he didn't think about the audience. He thought it was going to go to home video so he could produce his next one. And then it sounded like it was such a well-done film with so much heart and drive and tenacity that it found its own audience, and then his vision maybe snowballed from there.
To clarify a little bit, and feel free to clarify for me, he knew what he wanted to make, and he knew where an audience for it existed, and that he could make something at this scale that would fit tonally and with the expectation for a certain marketplace at a time when people in the States were not looking at the Mexican straight-to-video market as a way to break into Hollywood.
And part of the vision, too, was that he, for that direct-to-home video Mexican market, he was looking at the quality of it and challenged himself and had the vision to say, I can make this a little bit better. I can create action sequences that are better. I can create a narrative that's better. So I don't want to lowball this market, because I could, and I could, probably churn out a lot of schlocky direct-to-video things if I wanted to, but he challenged himself to make it more cinematic, to really figure out, really scrappy ways to make, to create dolly shots. He did it with a friend pushing him in a wheelchair. Those were his dolly shots to make that happen. He was borrowing, live ammunition and automatic weapons from the police department in the little Mexican border town where he shot. He wanted it to stand out as something that had a little more quality and a little more Hollywood pizzazz than you might have seen. So it was just a matter of not lowering the bar on himself and deciding, I'm going to try and take this up a notch, and it really resonated.
He doesn't do anything without a plan. I mean, it was Columbia really that came along and just made him an offer he couldn't refuse to do a theatrical. He wanted to reshoot parts of it for the movies because he originally imagined it for home video. He's like a hero of mine. He doesn't know this, but so I know a lot about this project. Anyway, it's a fascinating story. I would highly recommend getting that book, Rebel Without a Crew. It'll detail all this.
And I hope this is on Go 90, but it may not be. There's a great piece that he did called How to Make a Movie in 10 Minutes that details how he built the shots for that piece as well. So any non-Robert Rodriguez-oriented questions? You, sir.
I just want to ask, in terms of Canadian creators, because there's just a tremendous talent resource up here, and how would Canadian creators get to the three of you to pitch content? And there's a part two to that. So
how would, do you have content by Canadian creators, and how would Canadian creators approach your networks or organizations with pieces that they have to show?
Well, I mean, we actually do a lot of, we have kind of a sub-office in Toronto, so yes, we're very accessible. You could email me. I'm jpr@piestudios.com, and I would definitely take, I never turn down a meeting, because you never know where the next big story is coming from.
Well, for Go 90, I mean, a number of productions already shoot in Vancouver for obvious reasons, like a lot of American productions. We're still pretty early in our life cycle. I think, later this year we are planning a Canadian rollout for content. But I think down the road, if I could do a pie in the sky type of thing, I would love to do something similar to what Netflix has done, where we carve out some localized productions. We do it specifically for Canadian audiences and first window release in Canada with Canadian filmmakers and actors, and do it right. And have that be part of Go 90's offering internationally from a Canadian point of view. But at the moment, we're not really there. Feel free to email me, steve.wolf@go90.com. It may take me a little while to get back to you, but it's a little underwater. But happy to get you connected to the right people who could potentially help when we're ready for that.
And same for us. I mean, we've shifted our focus from creating and developing for our own air to creating and developing for other partners. So we're also at the sort of early stages of starting to develop those pieces, and certainly everyone in our organization, I think top to bottom, has a long history in Canadian co-production. So both the chance to co-produce and also distribute here is very interesting, but these are early days for us as well in that regard. But I am aderricks@elraynetwork.com, and would be happy to talk to any of you.
part two was for Steve, which is, with so much content, why wouldn't you sell that in international markets, in mobile video perhaps like to Orange or to Vodafone in the UK?
We do, actually. We're about to announce our first deal. But, you know, to date, so far, we've just been focused on growing audience in the US, but we do have a team based out of New York now that does licensing and syndication, downstream revenue, so we'll absolutely be doing that.
Yep, so one more question, I think. Yeah.
Hi, my question is for Steve. Steve, I know recently you have been developing a lot of content from authors, one of them being Colleen Hoover. She had I was a reader, and I noticed that you released like the first couple of episodes on YouTube and then put the rest of it on the app. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about like your strategy for choosing this book and choosing her and then releasing it a few bits online and then releasing it on your app, and did you get the results that you were looking for?
Sure. I mean, Confess did really well, partly because, I have to be completely honest, I completely underestimated the fan base that Colleen has when we originally did the deal for that project. So it looked like it was going to be like a nice high quality project, good story. I thought there were some performers in there that had real star quality, but it was not until we put the trailer for Confess on Colleen's Facebook page that I suddenly like had a wake up moment about like, clearly we have to reach these fans wherever they are. So if I remember correctly, I think it was still on Go90 first as a premiere. We did a binge release, which is actually unusual for us. We tend to do tune-ins on like multiple times per week or a weekly basis. But for Confess, there was so much built up audience interest, we just let them all go at one time, and it worked really well for us. But we followed that quickly, I think, with some social distribution like YouTube, to make sure that it reached as wide an audience as possible. Go90 still has, you know, relatively small footprint audience-wise compared to something like YouTube and Facebook. So we put things out, you know, to try to reach as widely as possible. So one of the things we're going to be doing going forward is we're going to fundamentally change the way we do releases. We're going to do day and date releases across entities where it makes sense to be both on Go90 and that entity. So a good example is within the family already, but like we have a project with the Huffington Post where we're going to do a day and date release with them and on Go90. We'll do some of that stuff on YouTube with the new Facebook Watch. We're going to experiment with some of that stuff as well. So we spent the first couple of years really being focused on Go90 as the release point. Now I think we're much more agnostic about that stuff. We just want to make people aware that it is Go90.
So just to wrap things up, I'm going to ask a question and ask each of you to answer it. For creators at this moment in time when they're thinking about their pieces, what is something that they could do in the research or the preparation of that piece that would prepare them for the distribution and technological realities of getting something to market in this current environment, and looking ahead to future environments that would really help them, you know, arm themselves for the place we're in where everything is up against everything else all at once, but also to highlight what's best about their piece and take great advantage of the technologies that we can present in.
I can start. I mean, I think that we've touched on it a little bit, but a key thing is the marketing thinking around that piece. And not just the marketing budget and where you'd buy ads, but who's the audience? Who's granularly, who are the people that you want to talk to with this? How do you think the best paths, what are the best paths to reach them and talk to them? I think that, you know, creators for a very long time have been shielded from that piece of the equation. There were, you know, buyers and distributors that would take that piece and be responsible for that marketing. And I think it requires both sides of the brain to really be about the content and the integrity of that piece, but also have, you know, a story to tell when it comes to who that's for and how you intend on building momentum with that piece of content.
Yeah, I echo that completely. I would say that creators need to come with a lot more these days than they used to have to come, but also less. And what I mean by that is that it's not enough to have a great idea. A great script is a good start, but like really having some of the thought around like who this is for and how you're attacking them and why it's going to resonate for them is important. And when I say less, it's like, well, we still like to be able to develop with you. So if there's a fully formed script and a cast attached and a director and you've got blah, 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 like that actually we find somewhat limiting. So it's a little bit of a tough fine line to walk. And the last thing I would say, what was I? Yeah, I mean, data is really key for us. Now, like, we would never expect a pitch to come in with the level of data that Verizon has access to around audiences. But it's always really refreshing when someone's taken that extra mile to put into their presentation or their talk, this is what we know about this audience. This is why we believe this is going to work, and it's going to work on Go90, and here's the opportunity that we see. That is a really compelling piece that usually is not present in what we get.
Okay, all that, plus, I would also add, you know, if it's a series, think of, you know, a lot of times you think like, here's my idea. Like, what's the longevity of it though? Is there more to it than just one season? Think about the long term. I mean, think about the arcs of the story. You know, you get through season 1, well, what's season 2? What's season 3? You want to think about it not just as a one-time thing. A lot of times creators go, here's a great idea, but I'm like, but then what? You know, think about the other aspects. Brands matter. Can you attach some type of brand to it? Is it like something like, you know, talking about the book? Like, if you can find something that hasn't been touched yet, it's only been in one ancillary way, like maybe it's just been a book or it's been a comic book, but finding that type of thing. If it's original content, then what else can help you with a cross-platform opportunity? Are there toys out of it? Are there books? Are there like, what else can you do to monetize that long-term? Because a lot of times people are saying, if it just falls into, you know, has one leg to it, it's not enough, but it's really looking at, you know, multiple ways to monetize and think about that. But I think that combined, if you can get all that and close to it, you can have a good opportunity there.
Thank you all so much for joining us today, and thank you in the audience. I hope you're all now ready to become revolutionaries and change all of this up again. So let's give our panelists a round of applause.